Hello and welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for joining again. We have another amazing guest, and this conversation is really special to me. I welcome to the show today Tanya Williams, who is a coach and social justice educator. And I had the privilege a few years ago to take one of Tanya's retreats, which I can honestly, truly say was a life-changing experience for me. And so I'm so grateful and honored to have you on the show. Really means a lot. And with that, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself. And it would also be great if you could let us know your pronouns.
Sure, sure. I want to say thank you to you because the opportunity to just be in conversations and to have a platform and a voice, I think is something special and is something really unique about the world that we live in right now. I'm still working to understand it, and you're giving me another opportunity for that understanding. So my name is Tanya Williams, and I use she and they pronouns. And gosh, introductions are always funny to me because I'm pretty much an open book. So I won't start like at, July 27th, 1972 when I was born. But what I can say is I'm originally from Houston, Texas. I live in Brooklyn, New York now. I identify as, for folks who might not be able to see me, I identify as Black. I identify as a woman. I identify as lesbian. I identify as raised working class, living middle class now. I identify as someone who was raised in a Christian church, specifically Baptist. I practice differently now. I identify as able bodied. I also, when I think about my work, I am a consultant and coach, as you said. And I use the language social justice educator. I've started adopting the language of liberation worker, but most people don't understand what that means. So really, honestly, people don't understand what social justice educator means. I do a lot of work around helping people understand oppression and the ways in which identity and power work itself out in our lives and kind of hold us back from the world that I think we want and that I know is possible.
Thank you for sharing. And can you tell us more about the work you do and also what got you interested in this work?
Absolutely. So as a, and I will go back a little bit on this. So I can remember back in high school. So I'm starting with the story first, and then I'll tell you more about what I do. I can remember back in high school, there was an organization called, in Houston, Texas, there was an organization called Students to End Prejudice. And this was back in 88, 89, 90. So a while ago, STEP for short. And I can remember going to the meetings and saying, I know this is important. And I think about those meetings now, and we weren't talking about hardly anything. We were just kind of all in the room together. We knew that we wanted to be friends with people who were different than us, but we didn't quite. And the people who were advising us didn't have that information either. And so it feels like it's been something core to my spirit to always understand and know that one, we as humans are sometimes greater than we believe. Two, we actually shouldn't be seeing ourselves or anyone else as other. And we are all connected. And so, with that as my foundation, I moved through college, through my master's degree, and were involved in similar organizations through those things, got to work in multicultural services, which was called at the beginning of the 90s, which turned into diversity and inclusion, which turned into social justice. And I had jobs, like I worked on college campuses in those roles. And there was a point in the late 90s, 1999, in fact, I went to something called the Social Justice Training Institute, which is still functioning. And I am actually on faculty now with that institute. But it was transformative, much like you talked about the retreat that we were at together. That was a transformative retreat because it had me look at myself, specifically around my racial identity, in a different way. I had not come out by then. I always think sometimes I had to get some stuff out of the way before I could even have my sexual or gender identity show up. And so, Social Justice Training Institute really gave me an opportunity to understand the ways that I felt um, as a Black person in the United States when I felt othered, when I felt not enough. That wasn't just about me. It had me understand that I had internalized a lot as a result of the system, and that caused me to want to understand the system more deeply. And so went on to do my doctoral work in social justice education. My dissertation was on looking at internalized racism, specifically in Black and African American women. And I know now, I used to always say that it was about internalized racism. What I know now, it was about a process to liberation. How do we, work towards liberating ourselves from these systems that we've learned? And so worked on college campuses, having conversations with students, and creating the space that I think I always wanted. And got to a point in my last role at an institution in New York where I said, the work is really important in the institution, and I don't really want to sit in on another meeting where I'm not focused specifically on ending oppression. And that had me exit a work life that was institutional and move into full-time coaching and consulting. And so now I am getting to work with a lot of different industries, not just higher education, but foundations. I do some work with NCAA, K through 12 schools. I go where folks want to engage in ending all forms of oppression. Could be racism, could be heterosexism, could be gender oppression, ableism. I want to have those conversations and build those kinds of skills that would help us in these forms of oppression that actually, like I said, stop us from the world that we want. So any conversations that I can have, I'm there. Might be workshops, might be one-on-one coaching, might be keynotes. I have a keynote coming up next week. But yeah, I just want to engage humans because this to me is the work.
Thank you for sharing that. And I wanna ask you a question now that I was gonna ask you at the very end. But
Hmm.
since you talked about systemic oppression, one thing, one question I have that I've really struggled with when it comes to coaching.
Hmm.
And I don't know if we if we gotta answer it right now, but I would love to hear your thoughts. So because in coaching we talk so much about internal barriers that keep us living our best lives possible. And the question I always grapple with is for BIPOC people, LGBTQ people, everyone from a marginalized background. How can we empower people from marginalized backgrounds? How can we help them overcome the internal barriers when they go out in the world every day and face societal stigma and discrimination every day of their lives?
Yeah. Well, it's a powerful question and it is a complex answer. And where I'll start, and we can, engage and you can tell me more about what you're thinking. Where I'll start is sometimes coaching, obviously, we do coaching one on one, unless we're doing group coaching. but we do coaching one-on-one. And I think sometimes, much like we're not therapists, and sometimes much like in therapy, it becomes about the individual and I, I hesitate to say, but their personality flaws. That it's something that Tanya struggles with, and if Tanya could just get over it, it would be fine. It is important to have the individual in the, you know, holds the individual. Yes, there is Tanya, the individual who, loves Broadway shows, loves who eats vegan, all these things. It's also to hold Tanya in her group identities. And so to actually recognize, like you're saying, BIPOC folks, LGBTQ folks, folks with disabilities, to hold them in a group identity. And so I'm moving through the world in a marginalized experience. And then to hold it at a systemic place or an organizational, and the organization is our whole, world, to recognize it's not just something Tanya, there are internal barriers, but some of those internal barriers were actually taught to me and taught to us as marginalized group members by socialization, by a system that is framed by oppression. And so when I work with clients who are specifically from marginalized groups, we talk about how they are existing in the system. And so in that system, they have learned some skills in order to play a role in that system that helps maintain that system. And this is the same if I were coaching a man, if I were coaching a white person, I'm going to look at them from that perspective of they have power in the system, they have privilege in the system that helps maintain the oppression. And so in coaching marginalized group members, we do a lot of work around what are the new skills that you need that will help you navigate the system from a place of power, from a place of agency, because the system thrives off of, people seeing themselves as victims, feeling like they're victims. And so I say it's complex, and hopefully this answer is helping us understand that how complex it is, that it's not just the individual who has internal barriers that they're struggling with. They're struggling with those barriers within a context. And we've got to understand that context and learn ways of being to not only read the context, understand the context, build up the power from within. And I think about, something like boundary setting. That is a huge skill for people who have been in marginalized identities in systems of oppression. There is nothing about the system, nothing about racism, nothing about heterosexism, homophobia, nothing about gender oppression that has us in identities that are marginalized by those oppressions be able to or know how to set boundaries, be clear about our boundaries, feel like, brave enough or courageous enough to even try on boundaries, because the system has constantly told us that it will crush us. And so we got to build inside out with awareness, with the ability to move with presence and intention. So there's a lot of skill building. I may have not answered your question at all, but that's what came to mind.
No, that was super powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's a question I've grappled with and continue to grapple with. And as you said, it's a very, very complex question.
Mhm.
And yeah, especially in the environment that we live in, with so many institutions slashing DEI
Yeah.
programs. I've seen my in my own experience, I actually dropped out of a coaching program because I felt like that program did not did not have us sit enough with those questions
Yeah.
and look at DI issues from a self-reflective point of view.
Yeah.
And I remember what struck me was how many people in the program actually wanted to speak up, but they
Hmm.
said themselves, we don't know what to say because we never had that training. We had the
Yeah.
basic DEI trainings,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah. And that's to me the sad part. I think I think after George Floyd's murder, there was this like spark of hope that like organizations across the board were really committing deeply to this work. And I think we are seeing the number of organizations that are like, uh, it's getting dangerous out here, so we're not as committed as we thought we were. And we will either let go of our commitment to and we use the language DEI, and most people honestly don't know what that means. They What we're talking about is identity and the ways that power functions in identities. I think people get scared of DEI, of social justice, because it becomes jargon and folks don't understand jargon. I actually think all of this work is, I used to say this to myself back in my master's program and my first couple of jobs. Everybody actually wants to engage in this work because we all want to understand ourselves more deeply. We want to understand our worlds more deeply. That work of understanding identity, understanding power, understanding why it's hard for me to have the conversation with someone who looks different from me, why I feel silenced, why I don't trust people who might be wearing the wrong shirt or wrong hat. That's all included in DEI work. And I'm sad about that coaching program because if anyone needs it, it is folks who are going to coach other folks. We're missing out on, like, we're not even having the opportunity. I can think about my coaching program. It's like helping people understand. One of our tenets was helping people understand that they already, like, the answers are within. But if we can't actually understand people and see their possibility and see what's capable for them, it's going to be hard for us to trust that the answers are within and help other people grasp that they have the internal knowledge also. Clearly, I have feelings about that.
Yeah, and I will say, taking back to attending your retreat, there was obviously the individual empowerment and leadership piece that was really important to me. But I think as a white person coming from a predominantly white country,
Mhm.
not understanding at that point kind of or knowing the history of the US, the dark history of the US, but not having been like prompted to really sit with it and think about it. I think one of the most powerful things that I took away from the retreat was having to sit with my own privilege and thinking about my own biases, and also being in an environment where I was told, okay, it's okay to have questions. It's okay to not have all the answers.
Yeah.
It is one of the things that I took away from that was it's the first step is having a willingness to have those conversations.
Yes.
And we can mess up and we can get things wrong, but
Yep.
that is the only way that we can address or change things in the world around us.
Yeah. And I, I was, just as you said, willingness, I was thinking one of the reasons that it was so impactful for you was because you were willing. And, you know, I know that the willingness does not look the same on everyone, And willingness goes a long way. And I'm okay with, you know, the least little interest, because that least little interest speaks to our humanity. It speaks to, the curiosity that lives in us, the acknowledgement that I know that there's something else out here and I don't understand it. And I think about, creating spaces where people can enter right where they are and not feel like they are going to be shamed. They are going to be, it's all vulnerable. Let's be clear. It's all vulnerable work, but you don't have to be shamed as you do the work. You don't have to be blamed as you do the work. You don't have to carry the guilt. And I'm speaking specifically about privilege. Shame, in marginalized identities, shame is how we end up, like oppression ends up keeping us in that victim place. But yeah, I think we all have the willingness because we want to make sense of this really complex world we live in. And I have a friend who talks about, like, we traffic in language. So short of, I'm waiting for the day where telepathy and mind reading happens. It's not here yet. And so for us to actually be in relationship, to live on this planet, which so far nobody is getting to escape. We're like all trapped here together. We have to be able to have the language, take the risk, be in moments of vulnerability without, you know, shame, blame, guilt, all of those things coming up. Or when it does come up, stay there with each other. Like, I absolutely have had folks in workshops, you know, in shame, and I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to hold that shame because I'm not putting it on you. That was oppression that came in and said, be shameful about this. But I'm going to stay here with you while you kind of shake it off or move through it or cry through it or feel through it. And but I'm also not going to cower to you. And I think that that's sometimes in workshops and situations, because we are expecting people to play different roles or play their roles that they were given by oppression. As a Black woman, I might say very clearly, you look sad, but I'm not going to come over and there, it's okay. You don't have to feel that. I'm like, yeah, it is a sad situation we're dealing right here. And I'm going to stay here with you while you feel your feelings. So I just went around Robin Hood's barn, but hopefully it was clear.
Oh yeah, this was super helpful. Thank you. And earlier you talked about creating spaces, and it's interesting. So because in my former job, I worked for a progressive communications firm,
Mhm.
and we did research around progressive issues.
Yeah.
And we would not talk to other progressives. We would talk to people who are conflicted about progressive issues.
Yeah.
And it was actually a really powerful, or I think a powerful program, because I would watch some of the interviews we did, some of the focus groups, and I would, like, when I first started, I would go in thinking, I mean, I don't really have like a lot of like in common with people who
Mhm.
think differently than me on this. But then what I learned from these conversations is it is so important to creating those spaces because people want to have those safe spaces where they
Yeah.
can ask questions. They want to grapple with these issues, but a lot of time I feel like they just feel scared of having these conversations because they're worried about being shut down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the way that you were thinking about it's like, oh, I don't have anything in common with these folks. honestly, I think that's what's got our country to, or gotten the United States to where it is right now. That and I blame a lot of things on oppression. So, not to say that people are not responsible, individuals are not responsible. And when we are born into a society that's already functioning with uh, power over and relationship to others and groups, when different forms of oppression are already in play, back in 1972, I kind of just got in under women having, like, not only abortion rights, but having rights to play sports in schools. And so I came in, I was born into a system that was already in play. And so we've been socialized into someone who looks different from me or wears different clothing or has different perspectives. I don't have anything in common with them. And what oppression has done, I'm like, if we can just notice that it plays us all the time, it's gotten us distracted from all of the things actually that matter, that actually have us tightly connected. I know, and I'm not a parent. I have watched a lot of friends that are parents, across race, across sexuality. When I watch these folks parent and care for their children and want the best for their children, so many things. It's like those are the things. It's like that keeps us tightly connected. Like the stuff that really matters is the place that, like, the connection, and oppression has deeply distracted us from that. And so that's why I'm sort of like, okay, we got to start understanding, we got to start deeply understanding the lies that we've been told about each other through oppression's lens. And we got to start unlearning that in deep, 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 deep ways. And I've been doing this work for close to 30 years now. And there are things that come up in me all the time, but I've done the work to notice, like, oh, that thought you just had, that was based in something that was taught to you to uphold systems of oppression. And so, what do you want to do with that thought right now? Do you want to believe it? Do you want to replace it? Do you want to consider it and think about, well, why is that like that? But just thinking the thought and acting on the thoughts given to us by our socialization, not not helping us.
Yeah. And it is, like you mentioned earlier, we share humanity. And
Yeah,
what I learned from those conversations in my previous job too is like once you ask people about their values, what they want out of life,
yeah.
you really realize we want very similar things. And
Very
we
similar.
are, yeah.
Because
And
we want to survive. And that's the thing. I'm like,
yeah,
humans just want to survive. That's And right now, the way that we're responding and reacting and going with those beliefs, that's not leading us towards survival. It's leading us away from it. It's leading us to silos. It's leading us to us and them. And I'm like, I'm not a historian, but yeah, war has never helped us. Othering has never helped us. We just really want to survive.
yeah. And yeah, I know like talking about this in the world we live in, it can seem very hopeless sometimes, but I'm a very optimistic person and I do hope, believe that we will get there one day.
I believe we will. We are taking the long route. That's, I laugh and joke, but I'm actually not. It's really interesting to me that everybody talks about, the arc of, I never get the quote right. I think it's a King quote, but the arc bends towards justice. And so if we actually believe that, we know we're going to end up in a great place. And for me, my spiritual practice has it that love, life, nature is always going to, you know, show up. It's going to always be present. And humans, we get in our way. There are different ways of being. And we get in our way all the time. I use the metaphor. I don't know if you're a Marvel Avengers person, but I enjoy Marvel movies. And there is this scene in one of the last few Avengers that last two, I think it was Endgame, but there was a point where Doctor Strange, who is watcher over the time stone that can move time forward or back and see time and see all the options in the multiverse and all of that stuff. I don't want to go too nerdy on you. Um, but there's a point in the film that says like Doctor Strange is off and playing all of the possibilities out for the current struggle that they're having with Thanos, who's I don't need to go. Okay, don't need to go that deep. But he plays it out and he essentially tells Iron Man, like, this was the only way that we were going to beat Thanos. And I want to flip that because there's actually many possibilities in us getting to justice, getting to love, getting to sustainability, getting to, you know, ways of being where we all survive and that we all live healthy and beautiful lives. Somehow we have it in our consciousness, our current consciousness has it that this is our only route. We're going to end up there. I have no doubt. We're going to end up there because we want to survive. All of us, sadly, will not make it because of oppression and the route that we're taking. But for some reason, right now, our current consciousness has our most recently elected leader as the route that we have to use to get there. When there are actually many, many ways, but our current consciousness has us in our own way. And we'll figure it out. I hope that was not too confusing, but I join you. I'm like, I not only have hope, I look at nature, I look at history. Like, yeah, we have these ups and downs, we have these moments, but we're always working towards survival, towards beauty, towards possibility, hope, love. And we just have right now different ways that we think we can get there.
Yeah. And it is important to keep that long view in mind. I remember I lived in Baltimore when the Freddie Gray protests happened. And that
Mhm.
was, I think, shortly before the 2016 election.
Mhm.
And I remember my ex-wife saying to me, see, like now you're gonna see all the ugly stuff that
Mm,
America has been wanting to deal with, and it all needs to come out. And I
yes.
think I'm an optimistic person and I want to keep that. But for me, it was like, oh, we're gonna look at those issues for a couple of years and then
Yeah.
it's gonna turn around. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen that
Yeah.
fast.
At all. And it's sort of like you were saying that, the coaching program that you were in kind of shoved issues of identity and power off to the side. It is our inability to stay with the discomfort that has us believing that if we just deal with it really fast, it's sort of like if we rip the Band-Aid off, everything when we when we pull it up, everything will be healed. Our skin will look exactly like it did before, you know, and that's not how wounds work. Um, Wounds actually take a long time to heal. And we are forever changed. And I'm using the metaphor of the body, but we are forever changed as that wound heals. And the United States has a wound that is centuries old. And so for us to believe that, and not only that, we have a wound, a couple of wounds, many wounds, specific to race, specific to sexuality, specific to ability to uh, faith and belief. So many wounds, class, are there, and we keep layering on because we never actually dig deeply into how we can start to heal. We believe that, and I'll just use race as an example. The United States has a belief that if I say that I'm sorry, that if it gets like a statement comes through the House that says, we apologize for slavery, that's enough. That's, we can think about how apologies work in our individual lives. It's not only is it not just enough to say the words, I'm sorry, I've got to grasp that you understand why you're saying I'm sorry. And then there's the long potential process of amends. And yeah, we have a lot to learn as a country. And we're relatively young. We're only 200 something years old. So lots to learn.
Yeah, there is indeed lots to learn. And I know, I mean, this is such an important topic, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I also want to make sure we talk about the individual leadership piece,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that is something that you do in your work as well, and that I personally benefited so much from too in your retreat. And I'm curious to hear how you would define authentic leadership.
Probably with our conversation, you're recognizing that I don't do anything very in short ways. um, it- that is, it's, I'm gonna try to do it relatively quickly. Authentic leadership, I think, connects a lot to what we were talking about earlier. One, it's recognizing that, like, what is our definition of leadership? And so many times when people talk about leadership, we have it as being positional. And leadership is, there's nothing to me that just because someone has a position doesn't mean that they are a leader. It means that they have position. Yes, they have power in that position, but it does not mean that they're a leader. And so, kind of holding that leadership, actually, I often think of it as, and Brene Brown has a great definition, and I kind of adopt this definition, that it's recognizing the possibility and promise in yourself and in others, and then working, doing what you need to do to support that promise, to build that promise, to have that promise live more broadly. And so when I think about, so that's leadership to the side. When I think about authentic leadership, I believe it connects back to the idea of really digging into that self work, because it's, if we go with authenticity as genuineness, something that is not a way of being or belief that is put on me, but rather coming from within, that is true to me, as opposed to outside of me thinking that I have to be a certain way, if I've been socialized by oppressive systems, if I've been socialized in racism, if I've been socialized in heterosexism, I actually don't have much clarity about what is authentic to me. I have a whole bunch of, you know, oppressive systems running through my mind, but it's not authentic to me, myself, as Tanya, as a being that is liberated, or in liberation, or in going after liberation. And so authentic leadership to me is really about doing that self work so that when you have the ability to see the promise and possibility in others and see it in yourself, you can, in some ways, really manifest that from a place that is grounded as opposed to a place that is just wholly influenced by socialization. And it's not an easy process, and it's not a finite process. I think authentic leadership is something that we are constantly growing into, and it probably will be growing into until we take our last breath. But we have to first want it, and also recognize that if I'm not willing to do the internal work, I'm probably not going to be able to practice authentic leadership that's going to be like transformational to organizations, to communities, to families around me.
That is, it's so powerful what you said, kind of like the external title versus the actual inner work.
Yeah,
Because I've seen it in my life too, that I would work for nonprofits or in the corporate world and would always wait for the big promotion or like the next step in my career.
yeah,
But over the last few years, I realized all of that didn't matter because I had to do, or I have to continue to do that inner work to
mhm.
be a leader over my own life. So that is
Yes,
so powerful.
absolutely. I love that. Positional leadership has us being leaders over other people's lives, and in some ways sometimes distracting us from like being able to practice authentic leadership, because it puts the focus out here. If folks were really willing to do that internal reflection and recognize, oh, I need to be a leader over my own life, and I get to be in relationship with other people who are being leaders over their own life from places that are healed, from places that are reflective, from places that have, you know, I've developed skill internally to navigate things. It would be a completely different experience.
And I also feel like that vulnerability is kind of weaved throughout this conversation. But I would love to talk more about how vulnerability plays into all of this, into stepping authentic leadership.
Absolutely. Vulnerability. Well, so I have reflected on this a lot because I have been trained as a Dare to Lead facilitator with Brene Brown, who has done so much research on vulnerability, and other people have done research. I just happen to be trained through her writings, and there are many people who are talking about this. And the more that I've thought about vulnerability is it really, like, we don't like to think of it, but uh, being a human is a very vulnerable, like, that is the function of our lives. So definition Brene Brown uses is vulnerability is the emotion that surfaces when we experience risk, emotional exposure, and I always forget the third. Anyway, uncertainty, risk, emotional exposure, and uncertainty. And so vulnerability is that feeling that comes up. And again, going back to that piece of we don't know how to be with discomfort. Um, we push off all the times thinking that we are vulnerable at any times, and don't choose to walk into spaces that might be vulnerable for us. When in actuality, our very existence is vulnerable. I'm going to go see a Broadway show play this evening. I'm going to get on the subway. I don't know what's going to happen on the subway. It's New York City. You really don't know what's going to happen on the subway. I fly across the country. I that's a different there is uncertainty there, but we often don't pay attention to those kind of vulnerabilities. We pay attention to the vulnerabilities that exist between humans, and we choose to not engage in those because it is a lot of discomfort that comes up, somatically, emotionally. If we could learn to practice our it's not steeling ourselves against vulnerability, but rather like getting aware and comfort to the level that we can and have the support that we need to be able to stay with the presence of vulnerability. I think that's when leadership can take off in another way. Because even when I look at myself and I think about when I was doing research and doing some reflection around my dissertation and understanding the ways in which internalized racism showed up in me. And I think about when I came out and had to look at the ways in which I had learned internalized homophobia. That was a very vulnerable process internally. It didn't feel good. It was scary. It was like, who am I going to be without, these ways of being? And I am so deeply grateful that I was willing to go there. And I would guess that you would say the same thing of, yeah, I was willing to be vulnerable with myself and with others that had me live in a life that I love right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting because for me, I think, to be completely honest and transparent, I think before your retreat and other similar kind of learning experiences, I don't think I would have been comfortable with those conversations. And not because I didn't want to talk about it, but I would have been so afraid to mess up.
Yeah.
And that would have kind of like kept me from having those conversations. But
Yeah.
through that retreat, through other learning experiences, I learned it's okay to mess up. It's okay to have questions. It's okay not to know everything. And that kind of frees you then to have difficult conversations and ask those difficult questions. So I love that.
It makes us human. There is no human that has not messed up, that has not made a mistake, that's gotten it all right. And, then I call the questions like, what's right? And so, yeah, if I had one thing to say to folks who are listening, like dig into and ease into it. I'm not like don't go jump off cliffs of vulnerability, because what'll show up is what Brene talks about as a vulnerability hangover. And then that will be like, oh, I don't ever want to do that again. That's not what we're talking about. I want you to just kind of ease in, do something. Last night, a friend invited me to a foundation salon. Um, and I got the invitation and it said festive cocktail wear. I have on a sweatshirt. Hopefully you're clear that I don't have festive cocktail wear in my closet. And so I went about trying to find stuff. I wasn't able to get anything. So I wrote him before we went, before I went to it, because it was his event that he was inviting me to. I wrote him and said, hey, I don't have festive cocktail wear. I guess, I'm sad I'm not going to be able to come. And he sent me a Marco Polo back and said, I don't even know where festive cocktail wear is. I'm wearing jeans and a jacket. So hope to see you there. When I realized, when he contacted me back, I realized that I really just was nervous about being in a room full of people with wealth, because it was a foundation event, of folks that I did not know. I'm an introvert. I, you know, I like to have deep conversations with one person, and it was going to be a room full of folks who are doing small talk. And I challenged myself anyway, and I sweated my way into that front door and did something. I felt very vulnerable, and throughout that whole process, it was like, okay, you're still here. Stay with it, Tanya. It's uncomfortable. Stay with it. And made it through the night. And no doubt, once we'd gotten through the cocktail hour and the program, I talked to two more people and I was like, I'm out. I did it. I made it. But it's recognizing we can survive those kinds of things in all parts of our lives.
Thank you. And I want to thank you so much for sharing so openly and showing so much vulnerability yourself. I really, really appreciate that.
Oh,
And I mean, those are super important topics. I could talk about them for hours, but I want to be again respectful of your time. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you a few questions that I ask all of my guests.
sure.
And I want to start by asking you, can you tell us about a time the kindness of a stranger has made a difference in your life?
Absolutely. So over the past year, a year and a half, I have been healing from a diagnosis of breast cancer. And the folks who come immediately to my mind are the oncology nurses um, that came into, the chemotherapy suite with kindness, with warmth, and gratefully, my friend and I who were there together tried to meet it with kindness. And but the fact that they come into every single one of those rooms ready to serve, not knowing who and what they're going to deal with, because chemotherapy is not a fun experience, and so the energy that the patient might bring. But the fact, I didn't know any of them before, and now I'm not going to call them my friends, but I do have very clear images and names and stories about the kindness of those oncology nurses. Incredible.
Thank you for sharing that. And can you tell us about a time you experienced a synchronicity in your life?
I So again, I'm trying to keep this short. So synchronicity, besides being a really great police album, um, synchronicities, I don't have them necessarily as synchronicities. I, from my belief system, kind of have them as, I think Wayne Dyer says this, things that coincide. And so it's a coincidence, but everything has a cause. And sometimes the cause that exists in the world, everything is causal. Sometimes the cause that happens is the thought that I have about something. And so, a simple synchronicity, people might call it such, is that I'm headed for the train. And just as I'm walking up to the subway, the train that I want shows up. That could be a synchronicity. Wonderful. And I like, I sort of say yes, to the universe when that happens. I'm not looking for it not to happen. And so I think that that's the thing when I think about that piece by Wayne Dyer. It's like I am looking for the good. I'm just looking for the good. And so I'm not, yes, they could be synchronicities, but they also are just, the universe meeting the good that I'm looking for.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, again, thank you so much for this super insightful conversation. I took away so much from it. I'm
Mhm.
sure listeners will do. I really, really appreciate you taking the time for this. And
My
before
pleasure.
I wrap up, I also want to ask you where listeners can find you to find out more about your work.
Sure. So again, the my business name is Authentic Coaching and Consulting. My website is AuthenticSeeds.org. And so I think people sometimes confuse that and think that it's called Authentic Seeds, but it's actually Authentic Coaching and Consulting. And the website is Authentic Seeds. And I am on Instagram at Authentic Seeds as well. One word.
And I will also put that in the show notes.
Awesome.
Thank you again so much. Yeah, it was an honor to be able to interview you. It was awesome to reconnect, and I really
Yeah,
appreciate having you on. Thank you.
I appreciate the ask.
Thank you.